In this world, there exist places untouched by time, realms where ancient powers still rule, where the laws of nature bend to wills older than humanity itself. The Amazon rainforest holds such secrets in its depths, beneath waters that have flowed since before mankind drew its first breath. The indigenous shamans speak of 3 warnings. Never take what isn't freely given. Never break the surface of the Black River after sunset. And never ever mistake silence for absence, for in the Amazon, silence means you are being watched. Miguel Vargas ignored all 3. Now he serves as vessel and warning, carrying within him something that has hungered in the depths since the world was young. A primordial force that doesn't simply kill, it transforms, it claims, it harvests souls. This is the legend of Yaku Mama, the mother of waters, and the price of awakening her ancient hunger. Unlike the dense jungles of Asia, with their phantom tigers, or the frigid mountains of Kazakhstan with their soul-hunting wolves, the Amazon rainforest presents a different kind of boundary between worlds. Here the veil between realms isn't found on misty mountaintops or in twilight groves, but beneath the water, in depths where sunlight becomes a distant memory, and what lurks below predates human civilization. Miguel Vargas had heard all the stories. Every treasure hunter who ventured into remote parts of South America encountered them. Local legends, tribal warnings, superstitious nonsense meant to keep outsiders away from valuable artifacts. After 15 years of excavating Incan ruins, looting pre-Columbian burial sites, and selling his finds to private collectors with more money than morality, he had developed immunity to such tales. His reputation in the black market was legendary. El Ladrón de Historia, the thief of history, they called him. Museums secretly acquired pieces from him while publicly condemning his methods. Collectors paid small fortunes for artifacts he extracted from sites untouched for centuries. He operated not just outside the law, but outside any ethical consideration. Everything has a price, he often said. Even the gods can be bought. The small village of Puerto Oscuro lay at the edge of the rainforest, where the Amazon River branched into countless tributaries, some so narrow they disappeared beneath the canopy. It was here that Miguel first heard of the sunken temple and its unimaginable treasures. He sat in the village's only cantina, a weathered wooden structure with a corrugated metal roof that amplified the sound of tropical rain. The locals had fallen silent when he entered. His reputation preceded him even here. Only the bartender, a man with skin like tanned leather and eyes that had seen too much, acknowledged him with a nod. "I'm looking for a guide," Miguel announced, placing a stack of American dollars on the counter. "Someone who knows the deeper channels. Someone who isn't afraid of old stories." The silence deepened. A woman ushered her children outside. An old man made the sign of the cross. Eventually, a figure emerged from the shadows at the back of the cantina. An elderly woman, her face a map of wrinkles, her silver hair braided with feathers and small bones. A tribal shaman, Miguel realized. "You seek the temple beneath the Black River," she said. It wasn't a question. Miguel leaned forward. "So it exists." The old woman's dark eyes seemed to look through him rather than at him. "The temple exists, as does its guardian. Yaku Mama," someone whispered, and several patrons murmured prayers. "The Mother of Waters," the shaman confirmed. "She who was ancient when the first humans set foot in the forest. She who devours not just flesh, but essence." Miguel had heard similar descriptions of local deities across South America. Always ancient, always vengeful, always conveniently guarding valuable archaeological sites. It was the same story with different costumes. "I'll pay handsomely for information," he said. adding more bills to the stack. "Double for anyone willing to guide me." The shaman approached his table. Unlike the others, she showed no fear of him. "Yaku Mama is not like the mountain spirits or the jungle guardians," she said, her voice dropping to ensure only he could hear. "She does not simply kill those who trespass. She transforms them, uses them. Their bodies become vessels for her will, carrying her warning to places she cannot reach." "Fascinating folklore," Miguel replied with a dismissive smile. "Now, about that guide." "The last expedition was 10 years ago," she continued as if he hadn't spoken. 7 men entered the Black River. Only 1 returned. "And where is this survivor now?" The shaman's gaze intensified. "Everywhere and nowhere. He walks among us, but he is not one of us. His eyes have changed. His voice carries echoes of the depths. When he touches water, it turns black with her essence." Miguel had encountered many intimidation tactics in his career, but he had to admit, the old woman had a talent for the dramatic. "I'd like to meet this man." "You already have," she said. "He has been watching you since you arrived." Miguel glanced around the cantina, seeing only the usual collection of locals and a few travelers. No one seemed to be paying him particular attention. "Very theatrical," he said with a smirk, "but I'm still waiting for useful information." The old woman reached into a pouch at her waist and withdrew a small object, placing it on the table between them. It was a carved stone, obsidian black, shaped like a coiled serpent with tiny amber stones for eyes. "If you are determined to awaken what sleeps in the depths, take this," she said. "When the water begins to change, cast it in as an offering. Speak these words: Yaku Mama, Mother of Depths, we seek passage with respect. It may buy you time to escape." Miguel picked up the stone carving, surprised by its weight and the craftsmanship of its details. "And the location of this temple. Follow the eastern tributary until the river narrows, and the trees grow so dense they form a tunnel over the water. When you reach the place where 3 channels meet, take the darkest path. The temple lies beneath the point where the water runs clear as glass, yet nothing can be seen within it." Miguel pocketed the carving and stood. "Thank you for the information," he said, leaving half the money on the table. "The rest when I return successfully." As he turned to leave, the shaman caught his wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong for such an elderly woman. "She will offer you a choice," she whispered urgently. "Remember this: the third option is the only one that leads back to the world of the living." Miguel pulled his arm free. "I'll keep that in mind." Outside, the air was thick with humidity, the sounds of the jungle intensified by the approaching night. As Miguel made his way back to his rented room, he felt a strange sensation, as if something cold and wet were sliding along his spine. He turned quickly, but the street behind him was empty except for puddles left by the afternoon rain. For just a moment, he thought he saw something in one of the puddles, a reflection that wasn't his own, golden eyes watching. But when he looked more closely, there was nothing there. Merely a trick of the light, he told himself. The power of suggestion after the shaman's dramatic performance. By dawn, he had assembled a small team, 2 local men desperate enough for money to overcome their superstitions, and 3 mercenaries who had worked with him before. They loaded their boat with diving equipment, weapons, and tools for removing artifacts from stone. As they prepared to depart, Miguel noticed a figure standing at the end of the dock, partially hidden in morning mist. A man, tall and unnaturally still, watching them with an intensity that could be felt across the distance. "Who is that?" Miguel asked one of the locals. The man glanced up, then quickly averted his eyes. El mensajero, he whispered. The messenger, the one who returned from the Black River. Miguel studied the distant figure with new interest. Even through the mist, there was something odd about the man's posture, too rigid, as if he weren't accustomed to standing upright. His clothes hung loosely on a frame that seemed simultaneously emaciated and powerful. I'm going to talk to him, Miguel decided, stepping onto the dock. No! The local grabbed his arm. It brings bad luck to speak with him directly. He is not just a man anymore. Miguel shook him off. If he survived the temple once, he could have valuable information. He approached the figure, noting how the mist seemed to cling to him unnaturally. As Miguel drew closer, he could make out more details. Skin with a grayish cast, hair that hung in wet strands despite the dry morning, and clothes that appeared perpetually damp. They say you've been to the Black River and returned, Miguel called when he was a few yards away. I'd pay well for any practical information about the temple. The figure remained motionless for a moment, then slowly turned its head. The movement was wrong somehow, too fluid, as if the neck contained more vertebrae than it should. You seek the temple, the man said, his voice carrying strange harmonics, as if multiple voices spoke in unison from one throat. You will find it. And the guardian, this Yaku Mama. The man's lips curved in what might have been a smile, though it never reached his eyes. She seeks you in return. Miguel noted with unease that the man's eyes were an unusual color, an amber so rich it appeared to glow from within. A genetic anomaly, he told himself. Nothing supernatural. What happened to your expedition? Miguel pressed. The shaman says you were 7. We were. The man took a step forward, and Miguel instinctively backed away. The others remain with her, parts of them at least. The rest was, consumed. And how did you escape? Those strange golden eyes fixed on Miguel with disturbing intensity. Who says I escaped? A drop of water fell from the man's sleeve, hitting the wooden dock. Miguel glanced down and felt his breath catch. The droplet wasn't clear. It was black as ink, and instead of splashing normally, it seemed to move with purpose, spreading in an unnaturally perfect circle. When Miguel looked up again, the man was gone. Not running away, not walking off, simply gone, as if he had never been there at all. Only a small puddle of black water remained on the dock, and as Miguel watched, it too disappeared, seeping into the wood without a trace. One of the mercenaries called from the boat, breaking the spell of the moment. We're burning daylight, Vargas! Let's move! Miguel shook off his unease. Parlor tricks and superstition, he told himself. Nothing more. He had encountered similar attempts to scare away treasure hunters countless times before. Yet as their boat pushed into the current, he found himself touching the serpent carving in his pocket, its stone surface unnaturally cool despite the morning heat. The journey to the Black River took most of the day, navigating increasingly narrow channels where the jungle pressed close on both sides. By late afternoon, they reached the point the shaman had described, a convergence of 3 waterways, one significantly darker than the others. That one, Miguel pointed, ignoring the nervous glances his team exchanged. The dark channel was eerily silent, the usual cacophony of jungle sounds fading as they progressed. The water grew clearer until it possessed an almost crystalline quality. Yet strangely, they could not see the bottom, despite the water being no more than 15 feet deep in most places. It was as if the clarity was a deception, offering transparency while concealing what lay beneath. After another hour of slow progress, the channel widened into a perfectly circular pool. The trees formed an almost complete canopy overhead, with just enough gaps for shafts of late afternoon sunlight to penetrate, creating spotlights on the water's surface. "This is it," Miguel said, feeling a surge of excitement. "Prepare the diving equipment." One of the locals refused to enter the water, offering to stay with the boat instead. Miguel didn't argue. One less person meant a larger share of treasure for the rest. He and the three mercenaries, Diaz, Rodriguez, and Cortez, suited up while the remaining local guide, a young man named Emilio, nervously scanned the shoreline. "Remember," Miguel instructed, "we're looking for the temple entrance first. No one takes anything until I give the word. We map the site, identify the most valuable pieces, then start the extraction." The men nodded, their professional demeanor returning now that they faced a concrete task, rather than vague superstitions. As Miguel prepared to dive, Emilio approached him hesitantly. "Senor, the water, it doesn't look right." Miguel glanced at the pool. The water remained crystal clear, but there was something odd about it, a quality he couldn't quite define. It seemed almost expectant. "It's just a trick of the light," he said, more to reassure himself than Emilio. "We'll be fine." With that, he and the three mercenaries slipped beneath the surface, descending into the unnaturally clear depths. The underwater world was eerily beautiful. Shafts of light penetrated the water, creating glowing columns in the crystal-clear depths. Visibility should have been perfect. Yet somehow the bottom remained obscured, as if the water itself were playing tricks with perception and distance. They descended further, following Miguel's lead. At about 40 feet, the vague shapes of structures began to emerge. Massive stone blocks arranged in unmistakably artificial patterns. Ancient ruins, perfectly preserved in their watery grave. Miguel's excitement mounted. This was no minor discovery. This was an entire complex, a sunken city perhaps, predating any known civilization in the region. The academic and financial value was incalculable. As they swam closer, the ruins revealed their secrets. A massive temple dominated the central plaza, its entrance flanked by carved serpent columns, their stone eyes inlaid with what appeared to be actual gemstones. Smaller structures surrounded it, some collapsed, others remarkably intact. Miguel signaled for the team to approach the temple entrance. As they neared it, he noticed something strange, a line in the water ahead, like a boundary between masses of different density. On their side, the water remained crystal clear. Beyond the line, it appeared darker, though still translucent. He hesitated, remembering the warnings. If the river turns black, turn back. But they had come too far to retreat now. With a determined gesture to his team, Miguel crossed the threshold. The moment they passed the boundary, the water temperature dropped dramatically. The crystal clarity diminished, replaced by a murky translucence that limited visibility to about 20 feet. Their flashlights seemed muted, the beams unable to penetrate the gloom effectively. Still, they pressed on, entering the temple's massive doorway. Inside, the true treasure was revealed, walls adorned with gold decorations, niches containing jade statues, stone chests that might hold untold riches. Despite the surrounding gloom, the gold seemed to glow with an inner light, beckoning them deeper. Miguel signaled for the team to hold position while he examined the central chamber. The walls were covered in carvings depicting a massive serpent, not just any snake, but a creature of impossible size, with features that seemed both reptilian and oddly humanoid. The carvings showed it being worshipped by human figures, who offered it sacrifices and built the very temple they now stood in. More disturbing were the sequential panels that depicted what happened when the offering stopped, the serpent rising from the depths, engulfing not just individuals but entire villages. The final panels showed something Miguel hadn't expected. The serpent merging with certain chosen humans, their bodies transforming, their eyes becoming like hers. The messenger from the dock flashed in his mind, those unnatural golden eyes, the fluid movements, the black water that dripped from his clothes. Miguel pushed the thought away. Ancient propaganda, nothing more. Designed to keep the population offering tribute to their priests and rulers. He signaled for the team to begin collecting. Diaz and Rodriguez moved toward the wall decorations, while Cortez examined what appeared to be a stone chest. Miguel himself approached the central altar, a massive stone slab that glowed with inlaid golden gems. As Diaz pried the first gold plate from the wall, Miguel felt rather than heard a vibration pass through the water. A pulse, like a massive heartbeat. Then another, stronger. Cortez looked up, his eyes wide behind his diving mask. He pointed frantically toward the temple entrance. The water there had changed. No longer merely murky, it had become completely black, an absolute darkness that seemed to swallow light itself. And it was flowing into the temple, not like normal water currents, but with purpose, like tentacles reaching toward them. Miguel remembered the serpent carving in his pocket. He pulled it out, its amber eyes seeming to glow in the dimness. The shaman's instructions echoed in his mind. Cast it in as an offering. Speak these words. But how could he speak underwater? It was impossible. The black water continued its advance, coalescing into a more defined shape, a massive serpentine form that blocked the only exit. Within the darkness, two enormous eyes opened, golden orbs that illuminated nothing, yet saw everything. Rodriguez panicked. He dropped his collection bag and swam frantically toward a smaller side passage. The darkness moved with impossible speed, flowing like living ink to intercept him. It engulfed him in seconds. There was no struggle, no bubbles, no sign of distress. He simply vanished within the blackness, as if he had never existed at all. Diaz and Cortez froze in terror. Miguel clutched the stone carving, desperately trying to think of a way to communicate the offering. In desperation, he held it out toward the advancing darkness, hoping the intent would be understood. The golden eyes fixed on him. The darkness paused. Then, impossibly, a voice entered Miguel's mind, not heard through ears but felt within his consciousness. A feminine voice, ancient and cold as the deepest ocean trench. "You come to take," it said, "like all your kind. You believe nothing is sacred, that everything has a price." Miguel couldn't respond verbally, but the entity seemed to read his thoughts. "Your offering comes too late, treasure hunter. It is given not in respect, but in fear." The darkness resumed its advance. Diaz was the next to panic, swimming upward toward the ceiling, searching for another exit. The blackness rose like a tidal wave, engulfing him, as it had Rodriguez. Again, there was no struggle, just absence where a person had been moments before. Cortez looked to Miguel, silently pleading for direction. Miguel pointed urgently to the exit, indicating they should make a break for it together. Cortez nodded, They swam with desperate speed, aiming for the small gap that remained unblocked by the living darkness. They were halfway there when the voice returned to Miguel's mind. "I offer 3 paths," it said. "Oblivion, transformation, redemption. Choose." The shaman words flashed through Miguel's memory. "The third option is the only one that leads back to the world of the living." But before he could focus on this thought, Cortez made a final desperate lunge for the exit. The darkness contracted like a closing fist, engulfing him instantly. Unlike the others, his end was not silent. A muffled scream bubbled through the water, cut suddenly short. Miguel was alone now, surrounded by encroaching darkness, those golden eyes fixed upon him with ancient malevolence. His air supply was running low, his options non-existent. "Choose," the voice insisted. Miguel thought of the third option, redemption. But redemption for what his entire career of looting, the treasures he had already taken, the cultures he had robbed of their heritage, the darkness closed in further, now just feet away on all sides. A tendril of blackness reached out, touching his diving mask, spreading across it like living ink until he could see nothing but those golden eyes burning in the void. "Choose," the voice repeated, more insistent. In desperation, Miguel formed a clear thought, hoping the entity would perceive it. "Redemption." "I choose redemption." The golden eyes seemed to evaluate him, searching for deception. "Redemption requires sacrifice," the voice said. "It requires becoming other than what you are. It requires service." Miguel didn't fully understand, but he was beyond caring about details. He would agree to anything that might lead back to the surface, back to air, back to life. He formed the thought as clearly as possible: "I accept." The darkness surged forward, not just surrounding but penetrating, entering his mask, his mouth, his lungs. But strangely, he didn't drown. The blackness filled him, replaced the water, replaced the air, replaced everything. He felt himself changing, his perception shifting, his understanding expanding. He saw the true nature of Yaku Mama. Not merely a guardian spirit or demon, but something that existed between conceptual boundaries. Neither fully physical nor wholly spiritual. A being that had watched civilizations rise and fall, that remembered when the land that would become the Amazon was a vast inland sea. He saw what happened to Rodriguez and Diaz, not death, but absorption. Their essence, their memories, their life force becoming part of Yaku Mama's collective consciousness. Oblivion, of a sort, though parts of them would exist eternally within her. He saw Cortez's fate, transformation, into something like the messenger he had met at the dock. A vessel for Yaku Mama's influence in the world above, carrying her warning to those who would disturb sacred sites. And he saw his own future, if he honored his choice of redemption. A life spent protecting what he had once plundered, a purpose that would extend beyond a normal human lifespan, a connection to Yaku Mama that would never be broken. The darkness receded. Miguel found himself on the surface of the pool, gasping for air, his diving equipment gone, his clothes soaked with water that looked normal but felt wrong. Heavier, more substantial. The boat was where they had left it, with the terrified locals still aboard. As Miguel pulled himself into the vessel, the man recoiled. "Your eyes," he whispered in horror. "What happened to your eyes?" Miguel didn't need to see his reflection to know what the man meant. He could feel the change, a burning sensation behind his eyes, a new way of seeing that perceived more than just physical light. "Take me back to the village," he said, noticing that his voice carried strange harmonics, as if something else spoke alongside him. "The others, The man asked, looking around fearfully. They made different choices, Miguel replied. In the years that followed, strange stories spread throughout the black markets and treasure-hunting circles of South America. Tales of a man with golden eyes who appeared without warning, who spoke with a voice that made water vibrate, who could somehow know where looted artifacts had come from and who had taken them. Museums found sacred objects returned mysteriously to their storage rooms. Private collectors awoke to find their prized possessions gone, with nothing but a small puddle of black water left behind. Expedition teams preparing to enter restricted areas encountered a stranger who showed them visions of what awaited them in the depths. Visions that sent them fleeing back to civilization. The locals of Puerto Oscuro now speak of two messengers instead of one. The original, who still appears occasionally near the water's edge, watching with inhuman patience, and the newer one, who travels far beyond the Amazon, extending Yaku Mama's influence to places she could never reach herself. They say the newer messenger sometimes stands at the edge of the Black River, staring into its depths with an expression that might be regret or might be longing. They say he speaks to it sometimes, as if conversing with an old friend, or perhaps a master. And they say that sometimes the water responds, rising up in a serpentine shape, golden eyes forming within it, regarding her servant with ancient satisfaction. For Yaku Mama's patience is as vast as the river itself. She has existed for eons and will exist for eons more. And now, her warning spreads beyond the Amazon, carried by those who once sought to plunder her domain. The indigenous tribes continue to pass down their three warnings to each new generation. Never take what isn't freely given. Never break the surface of the Black River after sunset. And never ever mistake silence for absence. For in the Amazon, silence means you are being watched. By the Mother of Waters, by the Harvester of Souls, by Yaku Mama, and now by her messengers as well. If you find yourself in the markets of Rio, the museums of New York, or the auction houses of London, and you notice a man whose eyes catch the light strangely, a man whose clothes seem perpetually damp, whose movements are too fluid to be entirely human, do not engage him directly. Simply return what you have taken from places that are not yours. Place what is sacred back where it belongs. Restore the balance while you still can. For the third choice, redemption, is not offered to everyone, and Yaku Mama's patience, while vast, is not infinite. In the endless cycle of cosmic justice, some debts can only be paid one way, with service, with transformation, with becoming part of something far older and far more terrible than humanity has ever known.